right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to 1851 Franchise. Today, I'm joined by Jan Gilbert. How are you?
Doing well. Good to see you.
Great. To start off, could you tell us a little bit about yourself and maybe how you ended up specializing in franchise law?
Sure. Let me give a little bit of background. Was obviously in law school at the time. Came into franchising right out of law school in the late 1990s. I'm sorry, late 1980s. Um, I wasn't quite sure in law school exactly what area of the law I wanted to be in. As a student, um, you don't have a whole lot of real experience out there with whether you want to be in a particular area, in a private practice in a law firm, work in the government, work in house, those sort of things. I had a little bit of a background. Started out as a business major in college, and certainly had an interest and still do very much in business and all things entrepreneurial. And from that standpoint, I thought, well, I'd like to do something involved with transactions because I think I could bring that interest to bear. Um, and I thought a little bit about corporate law, and said, well, franchising is a bit of a specialty within corporate law. It's a very much a niche, and it was a much smaller niche back then, even though it's still kind of a small area of practice in general. There were less franchise attorneys at that point in time. I was interviewing number of law firms at law school. Um, Dropped my resume for an interview at the old Brownstein, Zeidman, and Schomer law firm. Met with them. Did a little bit of research. This was before the era of the internet, so there wasn't as much out there. A little bit of Martindale, Hubble, that sort of thing, and learned a bit about their franchise practice. And I thought it was quite interesting. And I thought, well, this is a bit of a specialty. At the time, they were considered one of the two major franchise practices in the country, and met with them, and thought it would be a good thing to get into. And I've been in it ever since.
Awesome. So we can dive into our questions here. The first one I have here: what do you think is the biggest legal hurdle facing the franchising industry in this year and maybe looking ahead to next year?
There's a whole bunch of things going on, and COVID is certainly a big part of it. But let me step a little bit back from COVID. I'll get back to it in a moment. Probably the big legal issue that's been percolating for quite some time now is the joint employer issue. Is whether the franchisees and the franchisees' employees are kind of all one and the same. Whether the franchisor and the franchisee are considered joint employers of the franchisee's employees, and you've got some issues of agency and so forth. But there's been a bit of discussion and some legislation with respect to the joint employer issue, and it's one that is right now going through some significant upheaval, if you will, and not quite sure where it will end up. Franchising, to some extent, kind of got caught up in the issue. Um, California and a number of other states, but they were looking to the Uber and Lyft kind of situation, where Uber and Lyft drivers are independent contractors, and then I thought, well, are they? Are they under the direction, control of the bigger companies, and the rules that might apply there? And this is AB5 in California, um, may well encompass a more traditional franchise relationship. And franchise relationships vary quite a bit in the way they're structured, and especially in the area of certain service providers, where you've got the office cleaning, for example, where the customers or the clients are that of the franchisor, and the franchisor ensures a certain minimum level of contracts. And the question becomes, well, are these really just kind of outsourced employees? And it's gotten a lot of attention. I think we're kind of in the middle of it at this point. And it remains to be seen how it will be applied, where we're going to end up on it. I think there will be some litigation to clarify the issues, and the franchise community is waiting for that. And I think most franchisors simply don't want to be the one to be the litigant. So we're watching, but that's a big issue. The other kind of macro issues, and this is a little bit of the COVID as we wind our way through it, but we've got the issues of reopening and the rules and procedures that go into that. What we're seeing both in franchised and non-franchised businesses are mandates for vaccinations, requiring customers to provide either proof of vaccination or tests, and that's often dictated by the governmental authorities. Mask mandates, those sort of things. Um, that's coming to light. Other issues are simply the tremendous economic consequences that have occurred as a result of COVID and major business closings and the economic impact of that. The difficulty in finding employees. A lot of my retail franchise clients are having a tremendous difficulty staffing, and especially in the restaurant industry. So that's been a bit of an issue. And then you've got the supply chain disruptions, which are occurring all around the world. Again, not isolated to franchising, but a disparity between supply and demand, which is impacting the ability to provide goods and services. It will probably, at least in a temporary situation, affect pricing. It's a little bit of an unusual situation that even though we've had recessions in the past, this is based upon a public health issue, and it carries with it different consequences. For example, a lot of companies' earnings have been hit hard because of the supply chain issues. That's not a lack of demand, it's a lack of supply that's available, and that's something that's quite unusual. So I am expecting my clients to experience those sort of macro circumstances just like everyone else is, and hopefully wind their way through it.
Right, definitely. The next question we have here, in general, what is the most common mistake you see franchise brands making from a legal perspective?
I deal with a broad spectrum of franchisors, kind of from the startups that have never franchised before to the big multinational companies that have been franchising for years and are in a whole bunch of markets and so forth. Among the big mistakes, really lack of planning. When it comes to the startup companies moving too quickly, someone comes to them and says, "Hey, I want to buy franchise rights for such and such," and dangles some dollars in front of them, and they find that to be exciting, and they're growing not so much based upon a well thought business plan, but more from the standpoint of an opportunity. And obviously, you need to be opportunistic, but doing it smart is important. But we often recommend to the startup franchisors is that if they do not have someone on staff with some franchise experience, some real franchise experience, that they hire a business consultant. And we prepare legal documents, and as I explained to many of the startup clients, it takes me just as much time and effort to prepare a franchise agreement that provides for a 4% royalty as one that provides for an 8% royalty. It's one digit and just as easy for me either way. But a 4% royalty may mean that the franchisor doesn't turn a profit on the franchise business. An 8% royalty may mean the franchisee doesn't turn a profit. Maybe a 6% is a better approach. Those are business-related issues, and that needs to be considered beforehand. And it may be there are ways to tinker with it to ensure that the franchisor's expenses are a little bit lower. The level of services that they provide, for example, the types of services, whether they want to focus on particular markets so they can keep their costs down on a per franchisee basis, as opposed to having one franchisee in LA, one in New York, one in Florida, and one in Texas. There's a whole lot of travel and a lot of wheel spinning there, and maybe getting those economies of scale early is a better way to do it. And many franchisors do that. So those are the sort of things we often see internationally, or for the big franchisors. It's very much the same thing. Typically, the experienced multinational franchisors have done this before; they understand. But for some of the the smaller franchisors that might be going international for the first time. Again, the same sorts of issues. Is it based upon a well thought out business model? So what I tell my clients is, franchising is very much like running a marathon, and you want to make sure your shoes are tied before you set out to do that.
Well said. Yeah. Have one or two more here.
Sure.
This one is, what is one thing you think every prospective franchisee know before joining a specific brand?
I think they should know they need to do their homework. That entering into a franchise agreement is a long-term endeavor. It will entail considerable costs, just not just economic costs, but also their time and their energy. And quite frequently, we hear about franchisees who haven't read their disclosure document, or some haven't even read their agreements. I think it's imperative upon them not just to read those documents, but look at those as a starting point for the analysis, and digging a whole lot deeper, talking to existing franchisees, engaging an experienced franchise attorney, an accountant, so that they go in with their eyes open, know what they're getting into. That's probably the best way to mitigate risk, and to make for a more pleasant situation.
Right. Perfect. Lastly, what do you love most about working with franchises?
I love the people. I love the clients. They're absolutely wonderful. The colleagues. It's a very entrepreneurial sort of practice, and dealing with the business people is wonderful, and helping them achieve their objectives is fantastic. From a legal standpoint, what I really like is franchising kind of brings in a whole bunch of areas of the law. If you're dealing with a franchisor, you're not only handling the registration and the disclosure and the relationships, but kind of some of the subtleties that occur with respect to the relationship. And there's often something, I'll say, out of left field or a little unexpected that happens all the time. Give you a couple examples. Got a call from a client a while back. Always happens on a Friday afternoon. Jan, we found razor blades in our products. What do we do? We've had other situations. Well, I've got a franchisee who appears to have mental illness. How do we handle that? How do we handle it delicately to protect our interest and also make sure they're treated fairly? A whole bunch of issues of that sort kind of come up now and again. I say that sort. Each one's kind of a one-off, and each situation is a little bit different. But you get that, and it can be kind of fun and interesting, and keep things exciting.
Yeah, definitely. Well, that's a great place to end it. Thanks so much for chatting with us today, Jan.
Thank you. It has been my pleasure. Good to talk with you.